Michelle Hughes from Ageless and Timeless. Well, today I'm lucky enough not to have to drive to the studio, and I'm sitting with Sandy Gooch, who is the founder of Mrs. Gooch's Natural Foods, and we're sitting in her beautiful home in West Los Angeles. So yay for me that I didn't have to travel today. Sandy, welcome to Ageless and Timeless. I'm so happy to have you with us.
It's good to be here.
So Sandy and I know each other from the International Women's Forum, which is a group of about 7,000 very esteemed women throughout the world. Right, Sandy?
Yes.
And you and I have been members, you in Los Angeles and me in San Francisco. I don't know, for me, I don't even want to mention how many years. I think it's about.
I don't either.
Okay, so we won't mention, but we've been members for a very long time and have been very benefited by our membership. And Sandy, of course, is one of the reasons that I am a member, is meeting people like Sandy and her wonderful husband, Harry, who have been my neighbors now here in Los Angeles for a year and a half. So those of you who have not been in Los Angeles or around the West Coast may not know Mrs. Gooch's, but those of you who have lived here remember back in the day, and I think it was the late 70s, right,
yes.
Sandy? That the very first health food supermarket that ever existed, long before Whole Foods, was founded by Sandy Gooch. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how that happened, and then I'll let Sandy take over. So basically what happened was Sandy was a single mom teaching and raising her daughter. And she unfortunately became very ill with really a life-threatening disease based on chemical toxicity. And finally, her father figured out what the problem was. And I think your father was a chemist?
Yes, a research biologist and chemist.
Okay, so fortunately he figured it out, and so then put Sandy on a very strict program that required, that in those days when there was really no health food other than the little mom and pops, it required her to go up and down the coast of California to find the products that were going to help her to live this new life of low toxicity and very few chemicals, hopefully, and of course, healthy diet. So one day she was giving a speech, and one of the participants said, Sandy, why don't you start your own supermarket or your own health food store? And of course, in those days, that would be thinking very small, but it's not to deter Sandy because she always thinks big. So Mrs. Gooch's was born, and what year was that?
January of 1977.
So January of 1977, the first Mrs. Gooch's was on Centinela here in Los Angeles. And not surprisingly, the way Sandy does things, this store was not your plain vanilla store. And if you read Sandy's biography, it's quite amusing because she and her partner used to drive through the alleys, the back alleys, and go through the trash cans to find these little treasures that people had left these into the store and create more of a very welcoming, kind of like being in your own home environment. And, you know, I can remember coming to a Mrs. Gooch's one time when I was visiting Los Angeles, and I remember thinking, this place is so cool. It is so warm and so welcoming and so unlike most sterile stores. So that was what gave Sandy her first, I would call it, brand. And by the way, she was the first female to run a supermarket chain. So with all of that and knowing a little bit more about Sandy and what she did do in the past, let her take over and tell us a little bit about the chapter of her life that created this very successful supermarket chain that ultimately was acquired by Whole Foods. And that was in 1980.
Well, it was acquired by Whole Foods in 1993, September of 93.
So you actually had 77 to 93, Sandy, that you were running. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, okay, Sandy, tell us what it was like to have an idea, know that this was really important for your personal benefit, but also for mankind, and how you took the idea from the gestation, embryonic stage to the point at which you were now monetizing a 7-chain supermarket that became so attractive that I remember the story when you told me that the CEO of Whole Foods walked in. He said, "Why don't we do things like this?"
That's true. That's true.
Okay, so it's all yours, Sandy. Tell us what happened.
Well, I had been a school teacher for many years, a master teacher, and part of that included doing decor and engaging students, making them intrigued and interested about what they were going to learn, and knowing that there was no boundary in regard to the learning process. When I became ill, I was not able to teach for a while, and then after that, I was looking for the food that my father suggested that I eat. Food without artificial flavor, artificial color, additives, preservative, refined white flour, refined white sugar, all of the X, I's, and A's that you find at the end of the word of what would be in an ingredient. And so in those days, it was very difficult to find. There were tiny little shops up and down the coast that would specialize in one thing or another, but certainly not in the whole thing. So I drove from Santa Barbara to San Diego at various times to put things in my refrigerator and cupboard doors that made the difference. It took quite a while for me to turn my life around. People oftentimes look for that magic pill that's going to make things different. But instead, it's lifestyle and what you do with your life, whether it's exercise, food, etc. So after giving a lecture and a person in the audience saying, "Why don't you open up your own store that has everything that you're talking about, because we don't find that when we go shopping," I thought, well, okay, why not? Long story short, I did find a supermarket that had gone out of business, and in talking to the landlord at the end of it, he looked at me and he said, "This is the first time I've ever bet on a woman."
Yay.
I thought that was interesting. To get a loan was something else. Again, in those days, women were really not able to get loans on their own. For businesses, particularly if the business did not have a proven aspect to it, and there was no proven aspect to my concept because it didn't exist. So I couldn't get a loan for the first market. I had to use my own teacher retirement money and savings. That market became a success. So I decided to open up a second market. And I did, but I couldn't get a loan for that. And so we did a limited partnership. For the third market, the first two being a success, I was still a woman, and I couldn't get a loan for that one either. And so that we worked on cash flow and opening up that market with positive cash flow.
From the first two?
From the first two.
Mm-hmm. Did the banks not look at positive cash flow from the first two?
They would have if I had been a male.
Right.
So it was only on the fourth market that I decided to open up that I was able to get a loan from a bank. So those were very interesting, challenging times. Mm-hmm. What we did inside of the market for engagement was to utilize what teachers oftentimes do with decor and what have you. And at the time, I didn't have that much money, which is why I went up and down alleys looking for furniture and whatever might go on top of the gondolas. And it was very engaging because children would put it in the shopping cart, and while the mothers or fathers were shopping, the children would be looking up saying, "Oh, look at that, look at that." And everybody was having a very good time.
So you basically made the store's entertainment. This was the very first time this has ever been done.
Actually, there was a phrase or a word that was coined with what I did, and it was called edutainment, which was a combination of entertainment and education.
Oh, lovely.
Edutainment.
Yes. Why hasn't that stuck? That's a very cool name.
Well, it is in archives in regard to marketing information in some universities, etc. But yeah, you're right. And if you look at certain companies now, they do edutainment when you go into some of these stores.
Amazon.
Yes.
And certainly online as well, not only in the physical stores, but on on the internet, which is today's medium for commercialization.
Exactly, Michelle.
So, okay, those must have been some lonely times for you.
They were.
So let's delve into some of the inspirational aspects of what you were doing, because this is really a big part of what Ageless and Timeless stands for, is are people that face adversity, their obstacles, and find success. So in those moments when you were being rejected, let's say turned down for loans and having to finance bootstrap and grassroots, you were boots on the ground, basically. How did you buoy yourself? How did you keep yourself from being, let's say, just disappointed or feeling rejected? How did you get over those moments of loneliness?
Good question. Part of that had to do with passion. I was very passionate about this opportunity that I was giving myself, as well as a general population. A belief, a passion that I had about a concept of eating food that was grown close to the source, of eating organic things, eating things that were healthy, and also applying that to the body as well. And so the passion really drove me. The other thing was the knowledge and the information that I gleaned. I realized that I had more knowledge and information than most people in my category and out there. So my stores became a place for people in the community to come to garner more information and more help.
There was that edutainment.
Yes, the edutainment.
So did you actually hold seminars and do teaching of health information? Did you have people like Adele Davis, let's say, in those days, come to the store and help people through like a bookstore would do today?
Well, that's a very good question too, because it was a many-pronged aspect. One would be people who would come in and give demonstrations about a product, a machine, an author of a health book or whatever. There was always somebody there, some famous, such as Dale Carlson, some not as famous. Then there were the things of the product themselves. Let's taste this. How do I make that? How do I bake this? That kind of information. Recipes that were passed out for people to understand. Then so far as lectures were concerned, classrooms would come in, the school bus would deliver children, and I would walk around the aisles, the teacher, parents, and children, telling them about the different food products and then putting these items in a basket. And it was all free. They didn't have to pay for it. They would take this back to their classroom and talk about it, eat it, savor it, cook it, etc. So there was this wonderful engagement. And then in various hotels, churches, synagogues, etc., I would go in with products and give lectures. I think I did about 300 per year, where people would understand about the foods and whatever. And then there would be raffles at the end, and people would go home with baskets or bags of food that they would have won.
So when did your health turn around? How long did it take for you with this huge transformation in your own personal journey? What was the determining factor for you to know that you were on the right path?
It took about 9 months for me to really turn my life around. And I had some setbacks along the way when there would be ingredients, food that was not labeled or whatever. And so there would be a setback. But basically, it took me 9 months, which then I go back to the fact people are expecting that magic pill to turn their life around. But that doesn't really happen.
Right. I think this is a very important point you're making, that so often people just want the silver bullet. They want something that will happen very fast. And it's like the same thing with weight loss, right? People say,
right.
If I starve myself for a week, I'll be able to
Gee, I didn't lose 50 pounds in a week.
Right,
Darn.
right.
I guess I'll go back to my regular diet.
Right. Or, my bad diet. Exactly. So, and then, by starving yourself, you slow your metabolism down.
And then when you eat,
then when you eat again, your body thinks that you are in starvation mode. So you were basically willing to invest, and you were realistic about the time frame. And this is what you had to teach other people who were. I assume you had many, many people asking you for advice. How did you deal with that aspect, since you're not a medical doctor,
right.
but you were legally could not give medical advice, and you could be shut down for that. And I'm sure that all your people were having to be trained on that. How did you deal with that? When you want to help people, you want to give them some guidance. On the other hand, you're not legally allowed to do so.
Well, we would deal with a couple of attorneys who would guide us in regard to what we could say. And of course, our staff was totally trained. We might point them out to a book or 2 or 3 that would have the statements. And then there were generalities. It has been shown that some people can receive relief by doing this or that. And you can point out to research that was there. There were also doctors in the community, medical doctors, healthcare professionals that had that same scientific information, and we could suggest that they may want to go and see that healthcare professional, whatever it might be.
But then again, you are recommending someone, so you have to be very, very careful, because if it doesn't work out.
That's correct.
So we were talking about those lonely moments. So was there anyone in your life at that time that you turned to that gave you the inspiration or the ability to hang in there and be a fighter and never give up?
Well, there were a variety of people. It wasn't just one individual, but it could have been a philosopher or a book that I might have read. It was my father who gave me emotional support and also ongoing scientific information. It was friends who would say, keep on keeping on, don't give up. The community itself that acknowledged my efforts. So it was a multiplicity of things that gave me the support that I needed.
So flash forward now, you've been doing this and now have 7 stores, right? And each one had its own individual challenges. So of all the stores that you had, which one would you say was the greatest success in terms of your belief in what you were doing? Was there any one location or any one store that stood out because of some things that you were doing then that you hadn't done in the very beginning?
Well, that also is a good question. And each store gave me impetus to continue on. And each store was in a different kind of community. So I learned from that about what different demographic, psychographic profiles of communities would want, need, and embrace.
So marketing 101.
Well, yes.
You were going to get your MBA without having to go to school because you were learning OJT.
So it was breaking it down into what they call Gestalt.
Gestalt.
Whole, part, whole.
Right.
So there was the whole of the markets, and then the parts, which would be the separate markets and the various categories, etc., and then bringing it back to the whole for understanding, information, and progress.
Yeah, they say Gestalt, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Yes, so, I agree.
So what was your ultimate whole? What would you call, how would you describe that at the end of the process of Gestalt?
Staying true to what you state, staying true to your goals, your philosophy, your mission statement, etc., which then goes beyond money or listening to what a few people might say. Well, why do you do this? Gee, if you just carried something with sugar or preservatives or whatever, you could make more money or you could do more, whatever it is. Be true.
Be true to your concept.
Your concept. Don't deviate.
This is one of the biggest distractions for entrepreneurs, I think. Again, I'm, of course, speaking from my own experience, but also from listening to many, many others. And that is that when you have a mission or a concept like you did, there is so many people that are going, or so many opportunities to go in different directions early on and to dilute your focus. And so you stayed true to your mission and you did not let the defocusing occur. That is a very brave move, because monetization, at the end of the day, you still, you may be an entrepreneur who has a beautiful mission, but you still need to make money. And if people are offering you opportunities that might be, that monetization, but you're not willing to give up your true purpose,
it's not worth it. Now you can add to your concept as more information comes in. For instance, when I started the market, we didn't have irradiated food. Once it was that was started, then I added that to the mission statement. We didn't have genetically modified organisms in food when I first started, but when that occurred, then I added that to the mission statement.
When you say added, you mean you were not willing, you were unwilling to have GMO products.
Exactly. In other words, food without blah.
Right.
And as more information comes, particularly now in the tech world that we're living in, there's information that is presented to us every day. So to take that and figure out what is applicable to my goals and my mission statement and what doesn't fit in, whatever that might be.
So as you began to grow and now a set of different problems or issues and challenges from when you were just an idea. So how did you manage through the growth years in terms of the people, the resources, as you just said, the mission, which you wouldn't deter from your pure mission, but how did you manage all those other aspects of a rapidly growing company?
Well, I think part of it had to do with care of the employees, honoring them, respecting them, giving them the wages that they needed, allowing them to move up. So that was one way of managing. The other was incorporating things that we learned along the way and including that with our employees and also with our customers, so that there was ongoing mental expansion as well as expansion with the product itself.
So you just said something so important in that you cannot really have a successful company without the people. The people are what makes the difference. Anybody can have a great idea, but executing on that idea means you have to have other people supporting you. Did you have to learn on the job about delegating? Because here you are, this one woman, all by herself, never done. No one ever has ever done anything like this before. You're a pioneer, and here you are. Suddenly, as time goes on, growth is now a different challenge. So, how did you learn about what the right things were? You just said, taking care of people and so forth. But did you have to go to school for that? Did you talk to other people who were doing it? How did you learn about the very, very important subject of people management?
Well, I did go to organizational meetings, whether it was Food Marketing Institute or the natural products industry, et cetera, which was now growing, talking with health store owners across the country, always garnering more information, reviewing books from and classes from universities, etc.
Mm-hmm.
You never stop learning.
Yeah. So you were on a lifelong journey.
It was, yes, and I think that that's what being an entrepreneur is all about. Look at Facebook. It started out as a tiny little kernel of an idea.
Well, all of those companies, the FANG companies, the Facebook, the Apple, the Netflix, the Google, all of those companies had moments where they could have gone under.
You bet.
So this is another example of the entrepreneurialism that we're celebrating in our Ageless and Timeless podcast, which is that you never give up, and you stick to your ideas, you don't deviate, and you're pure. And that at the end of the day, 50% of all startups fail. That's within 3 years. So what you accomplish on the other half of the 50% is truly amazing. So why did Whole Foods want you? What was it that you made them come to Mrs. Gooch's and say, we want to buy you?
Well, our sales were much greater per store than theirs were. We were in an area, Southern California, where Whole Foods was not. And so by acquiring us, that would give them the legwork. We also had very knowledgeable employees that could, in theory and in actuality, help them to grow and expand.
So how did it feel, Sandy? I know this is an emotional issue because you built this company. It's your baby. You nurtured these people. They're now your family, your extended family. How did you feel when you were no longer the owner, Mrs. Gooch's, and now you are coming back as a visitor, so to speak? Tell us about that.
I was very sad because I had given birth to this baby as such, and my family were the 830 employees that I had, and I knew each one of them, and I appreciated what each one of them had to offer and contribute to our process of Mrs. Gooch's growing. When we were acquired, I was very sad because it was like giving up the baby, kind of
adoption,
the adoption as such. And so there were many months after that when I could not go into a market. I tried once and I broke out into tears. But as time went on, I was able to go back into the market, greet the employees, give them hugs and so forth. So I think part of that has to do with just the elapse of time and developing your life going into other directions.
Well, so obviously you gave up a lot of your personal life during that time. So how have you been able to manage the work-life balance? This is something that we all struggle with.
Yes.
And I know, during those years, but also since then, because you haven't stopped working, and that's another, we're going to get to that chapter in a moment, but just globally speaking, how do you manage your work-life balance?
Well, we do some travel, but interestingly enough, when I travel, I'm in supermarkets and areas where I'm reviewing, getting information, talking to people that I know, whether it might be in Italy or England or fill in the blank, and applying that, going back into people that I know here in the industry, whether it's in the supplement arena or the food arena or whatever, and imparting that information back to them in order for them to help and improve their company or their position. So some of it is travel, but even there, there's a lens that occurs where I'm looking at the food or health aspect. Part of it is working with nonprofit organizations to help them to improve with their concept, usually having to do with health, whether it's with the environment or with food or the community process itself, or gender equity, whatever that might be, working with universities. And so it does keep me busy.
Well, and so now, because you are so busy and you are giving back always, you're a true philanthropist. So, but you must have time for yourself. So let's talk a little bit about your personal daily habits. So how do you keep yourself healthy, fit, mentally strong, stress-free? Give us some insight into what your personal is.
Well, I enjoy doing things with my husband, so I'm very fortunate to have a very supportive person in my life. I start my day by reading the New York Times and the Los Angeles Times, and I have so I'm able to do that. We live in a part of LA where it's very walkable. We do a lot of walking. I also am involved in Tai Chi and with Pilates. So I do that as well. And then when I'm in, have access to a gym, I can do reformers and treadmills and so forth.
So what about diet?
Diet. Our home, our refrigerator and cupboard embodies what Mrs. Gooch's was about. So you cannot find artificial flavor, artificial color, additives, preservatives, refined white flour, refined white sugar, etc., GMOs in our house. So we shop in stores that feature those products. So that's diet. When going out to eat at a restaurant, I try to incorporate as much of my philosophy as possible. So I don't eat farm-raised fish when I'm in a restaurant. If the chicken is not organic, I'm not eating it. If the beef is not organic, I'm not eating it.
Organic or grass-fed?
Grass-fed, right. Correct.
Right. So have you been able to overcome all those allergies and those
Yes.
because of this? So this is now a whole new chapter in your world. You don't have to worry anymore about what was plaguing you when you were not educated, when you were uneducated.
Yes.
And now, so really, Mrs. Gooch's did you personally as much service as you did to the world, in the sense that you have reformed the way people shop, the way they think about their health. So
yes,
is there a life after Mrs. Gooch's? I know you're on several boards, you just mentioned that. It seemed to me you got involved in the LA school district, correct?
Yes, I was.
Okay, tell us about that, because that's really an area where I think you can make a huge impact. And have you been able to affect change because of the horrible programs that existed prior to Mrs. Gooch's?
Well, yes. After the acquisition by Whole Foods, I started a program called the Healthy Meals Team in the Los Angeles School District, where we changed, and the beta project was with Venice High School, and we changed what was being served in the cafeteria. And we worked with the National Potato Board and other boards to bring in healthy food to that cafeteria. And we worked in conjunction with the Harvard School of Public Health to develop a process whereby this would be incorporated. We pre-tested and post-tested all of the students that would go into the cafeteria to find out what the usage was. We found out that over a period of 3 years, the increase in student participation in the cafeteria was just phenomenal. It was amazing. And there were so many believers to help with the lectures. For instance, we had Buzz Aldrin, the astronaut, who came and gave a lecture about what they were eating in outer space. We brought in dark field microscopes so that students could look at cellular structure, etc. Since then, worked with boards, for instance, a board called, a nonprofit called Growing Great, where the intent is to teach students, parents, teachers, and the community about how to grow, how to plant, grow, harvest, cook, prepare, and eat foods grown close to the source, healthy foods. And it's phenomenal. That Growing Great is growing exponentially year after year.
I know some schools are actually having gardens.
That's
community
correct.
Were you able
We
to
did
do
that at Venice, and Growing Great does that too. Each school has, for Growing Great's process, has an area where students can grow their foods, and then they eat them and prepare them in the classroom.
So Sandy, if we could list 5 qualities that you believe are absolutely vital to being successful in the world, in the business and philanthropic, in all aspects of life, what would those 5 qualities be in your?
Boy. One would be passion.
You said that. That's really
that is really an important quality. 2 would be knowledge and information. 3 would be the opportunity to allow yourself to garner additional information,
so education,
to expand and educate. 4 would be to get feedback from your community in regard to how they feel, what is going on, suggestions, information that the community can give. And then the last would be going back to the gestalt of building that whole again, whole, part, whole, the whole being greater than the part. But you never leave that whole stable. You are always able to expand that whole.
That's like Steve Jobs said that in one of his that famous commencement speech that he gave at Stanford, is the type of thinking that an entrepreneur must have is what you just described, is thinking outside the box, basically daring to do something differently, daring to take risks. I think you certainly epitomize that, and to do so without having any knowledge of the outcome. Knowing that what you want to achieve, but not knowing what is going to happen. And there was I think Ben Carson wrote a book about taking the risk. Have you read that? Are you familiar?
I have not read that book.
Okay, so basically what he's saying in that book is, what would you rather do? Look at the risk reward and take the risk anyway, or do nothing. So if you don't get up to bat, how are you going to hit your grand slam, right? So the whole point is, what's the worst thing that can happen if you take the risk? What is the worst thing that can happen? Well, maybe you fail. So let's talk about failure for a moment, because that's another area I think that must have crossed your mind during those early years, is what if I fail? So did you go through that evaluation process in your life? And did you have sleepless nights? Well, how did you deal with it?
I did have sleepless nights.
Mhm.
Harry can certainly vouch for the fact that I would oftentimes wake up in the middle of the night and start pacing. How am I going to handle this? What's going to happen here? Many challenges and what happens. But you cannot live your life with the potential of failure. And I remember attending a lecture one time where the presenter walked around with a pretend bag of baggage of, oh, this could happen.
Yeah,
what
ifs.
Me. The
Right.
what ifs.
Yeah.
And his shoulders got more
Drooping.
scrunched and drooping, and his body was like this until he was so weighted down that he couldn't see in front of him. And then he used the other option of saying, my arms are outstretched and I will take in the information and the knowledge that will help me to be a success. And all of a sudden his body was standing up straight and his shoulders were back and he wasn't scrunched down. So it depends upon how you look at life and what are the opportunities versus the problems.
You know, that's so interesting because you're basically talking about PMA, positive mental attitude, and that your thoughts create your reality. So if you think negative, you're going to, guess what, attract negativity.
That's
if
right.
you think positive, somehow miraculously positive energy, because we are all energetic beings, right? So positive energy comes to you. You are a magnet for that. So where are you today, Sandy? What's filling your life? I know you mentioned that you're traveling a lot and you have your wonderful husband that you journey through the world with and learn by, going to these other supermarkets that you still have a passion for. So you're still curious. But what else? And your exercise and your whole wellness profile. But I know you're doing other things. I know you've done some real estate investing. So tell us a little bit more about what happened after Mrs. Gooch's.
Well, really incorporating considerations about the environment in regard to what I'm doing, whether it's the environment of our planet, global warming, etc., toxins that are, etc., to the environment of gender equity. So what am I doing? I'm working at Harvard at the Women's Leadership Board located at the John F. Kennedy School of Government to help to bring gender equity information into groups globally, countries, society, and how to incorporate that. I'm still working with various businesses in regard to environmental issues, whether it's farming or teaching people about what are the appropriate things to do in their life. Yes, real estate, I'm involved with that. Various boards, whether it's local or regional or the whole country. And so it's all about giving back to the issues that I am positive about. And it doesn't only include here, it includes just the entire world and where can I make a difference.
You just hit one of the most important themes of my passion and my purpose in creating this podcast is how do ordinary people do extraordinary things and make a difference in the world, a positive difference in the world. And that's why we're showcasing people like you who are great role models, and vicariously we can learn from people who have had these experiences and who are teaching us. We are each other's teachers, correct?
Yes, we are.
There isn't a person in the world that doesn't come into your life for a reason. And it's your job, your quest in being a curious, learning human being to ask good questions and learn from those people. And then guess what? They learn from you too.
That's correct.
So, Sandy, if you could say one word right now, one word other than passion, because we already know that's your favorite word, but one more word that you think would be I call it the silver bullet, the word that you want to leave our viewers and listeners with, and maybe make it a sentence if you prefer, but one lesson that you think is what you would like to be your legacy, what you are wanting to teach others.
Oh my goodness.
Is that too broad a question?
No, actually, I'm going to use that in two parts.
Okay, good.
They kind of coincide. The word I would choose would be love.
Oh, I love that.
And
thank you.
We could go into a variety of detail in regard to why I would choose that word. Mm-hmm. But the statement I would choose would be, he or she who has the greatest amount of information has the greatest amount of potential power.
Wow, that's really important. So let's break that down a little bit. When you say information, what are you saying? What do you mean? Because obviously information is power. We know that.
Yes.
We're in a world of information. It's like information overload. So how can we break it down a little bit in terms of how you discern what information?
If you close your eyes and don't continually take in the information as it relates to your product, your goal, your ideas, etc., then you are stalled. When you have more information, then you have additional questions that you can ask, statements that you can impart, additions that you can have to your product, etc. So you never stop, and that can be power. The power to do one thing or many things. But if you are stalled, if your car is stalled on the highway, where's the power? It's not there.
So always
you have
learning.
To fill it up to get the power to move you on. And you continually have to fill it up, whether it's with gas, whether it's with electricity or whatever, in order to have that vehicle continue to move.
So you're really talking about lifelong learning.
It doesn't stop.
It never stops. Right. So there's always books that are there any favorite books that you have that you want to share with us that have really helped you in your journey?
Not really. I think that there is such a continuum of information that I have garnered, whether it's publications. The London Financial Times has been very helpful to me. Other newspapers. Architectural Digest, which is about art, etc. Whether in design, there's such a multiplicity of things out there.
You're right. And I know for me, I read business books voraciously, and you learn so much from the getting into the minds of these great thinkers. Right, and philosophers, Gandhi,
Thich Nhat Hanh, so many, Michio Kushi, so many people who are great philosophers.
Rumi, do you ever read?
Yes,
Rumi?
yes.
Such a beautiful
Kahlil
Gibran, yes. Right. Well, I know we're running out of time, Sandy, and this has been such a delight to be here with you today. And I wanted to ask you one final question, and that is, if we're flash forwarding 5 years from now, where would you like to be in your life at that point?
Continuing to make a positive difference with communities, cities, society, and the world.
Do you think you'll write a book?
I already have.
Oh, where is that book?
It's up on my bookshelf.
Oh my gosh, Sandy, I never knew you wrote a book. What's it called?
If you love me, don't feed me junk.
Oh, that's fabulous. We need to flash that on the screen. Let's see. I don't know if I can do that. Okay. Can we,
It's out of publication right now.
oh, there it is. You're
But
flashing it.
there it
Okay.
is.
If you love me, don't feed. It's out of publication. Why?
Well, because I did this many years ago. But since then, I've been in a variety of books worldwide.
Featured in books, but I was
Featured.
thinking of you.
But I did write a book. Took me 18 months.
Wow.
I did that in my spare time.
Yeah, I was going to say, what spare time, right? Well, thank you, Sandy, for joining us today on Ageless and Timeless. And we wish you the very, very best. You and Harry have the most beautiful relationship. It's one that is so enviable and a role model for all people that are journeying through life with a partner in a beautiful, loving relationship. So thank you again.
My pleasure. Okay.